So for the first part is to invite each panel member to spend about 5 minutes introducing the company, highlighting experiences for these past 10 or so months, and also obviously giving a little history of their company prior to that. And after everyone's introduced themselves and their company, we'll have a short panel discussion to take up the rest of the time till about 10:30. Got a nice mix of businesses. I figure what we do is go alphabetically. So in terms of surnames, so Paninda Dadwar with Imobisoft, I'd like to ask first, then Peter, then Chris, and then I'll come at the end. Paninda, over to you.
Thank you, Charles, and good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Paninda Dadwar, CEO of Imobisoft. We're a bespoke software and automation agency based in Coventry. We provide services across enterprise and SME clients with specialisms in healthcare, utilities, and manufacturing. Now, it goes without saying that many firms have to find new ways of working. And innovation isn't always just the function of new technologies. Innovation can also be about changing our approaches to existing issues. I'm just going to mention a few examples of small changes we've made that have helped us or our clients during this period. The first is regarding a project with Birmingham Children's Hospital. Just prior to the year, we were commissioned by the Birmingham Children's Hospital to develop a digital tool to help sufferers of a condition called KU. Without going into too much detail, the condition has an intolerance to having too much protein can have significant impacts on their health. It's much worse in children. As part of the process of developing a solution, once we reached the prototype stage, we would normally have held a testing workshop with both the clinicians and patients. Obviously, this was no longer possible, so we started down the route of organising the testing virtually, sending instructions on how to download the application and Zoom links for meetings. And that was before the time Zoom had become the verb that it is now. However, across such a diverse range of individuals and varied, and so an initial response of what is Zoom wasn't that uncommon. And our first learning curve was that we needed to be as channel agile in our communications as possible. So people have different levels of access and understanding of technology. So rather than going down a particular channel, we offered them the channels that they were most comfortable with. So whether it was Zoom, whether it was Teams, Skype, WhatsApp, FaceTime, and some of these channels that people were more used to dealing with in their day-to-day lives. So while this meant that we had to do a lot more sessions, the changes actually led to a lot more detailed feedback. And so actually we had a better development process in total. And my second example is of a software project we had with a local hydraulics engineering firm. And as a general rule, in a pre-COVID, pre-lockdown world, we had always tried to ensure that when we present creative and design ideas to clients, we like to do this in a face-to-face meeting. And my rationale for that has always been that the initial emotional response that we get in facial or body language is sometimes far more telling than the email or spoken response that you get afterwards. At the end of the presentation, when your client says, could we try a slightly subtler tone of red or blue, whatever the color may be, you can quite often read between the lines of whether the client's saying that they want a wholesale change or whether it's a minor amend. Now, these nuances can be easily lost on a video call. So one of the things we found is, and can also have some interesting technical hitches, we had another client who was so adamant that we changed the shade of color from original design. In the end, we changed it as they'd requested, only to find that at home, he'd been forced to use a very old laptop, which had a poor screen resolution. So in the end, when he returned back to the office, we realized that we had to change it all back to what it was originally because he just hadn't seen it correctly on the laptop that he was using. Unfortunately, I suppose as a software development firm, we were quite used to the idea of remote working already, but I'd say that this did lead us to underestimate the challenges that clients had to go through to adapt to new ways of working. And one of the things that came about is our clients' willingness to try different softwares and platforms. So one of our clients just asked us to look at how best you could share documents in his remote teams and have multiple people accessing them. We suggested using the Google solution, and his initial response as a long-term Microsoft user was, but aren't those just poorer versions of Excel and Word? And however, now having used those, he's actually thinking of making wholesale changes in his business. And I suppose so. The overall main themes we've picked up is that we need to, make sure that we offer our clients as much choice as possible, so they're comfortable with the channels and tools they're using. Be more patient, and sometimes change forces us to reconsider options that we previously discarded or not even considered, and this can actually be a good thing at the time. And so that's a little bit about what we have to say. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Belinda. We'll come back and pick up those as we get into the panel discussion. But for now, if we can go to Peter Hughes from Kenton In-Store.
Well, my name is Peter Hughes. I'm Managing Director of Kenton In-Store. I'm here to really talk about Pivot and Prosper and the good work they did for me. So Kenton are screen printers. You can see some of it behind me in the background. We're screen printers and large digital printers. So we supply supermarkets with cardboard displays. And we also do the tire industry, DIY, food, leisure industry. And of course, when early March, and COVID hit strong and the shutdown came on, our order book was empty, or very empty, I should say. And we needed to do something different. So we decided to go for making cardboard work dividers, so workplace dividers, PPE of a sort, where the cardboard would be used with a window in it to divide people up. And it went quite well. And we could make these because that's what we do, we work in cardboard. We then got a phone call from the NHS, a rather scary phone call, from somebody who knew us from the past, from probably 30 years ago. And she was a chief purchasing officer. And she wanted to know if we could supply her thin plastic. I said, what for? She said, well, we're having to use A4 wallets to make visors out of. I thought, wow. So I said, we can do much better than that. We can supply you a visor finished. And within a day, we produced a visor and we shipped it off to her. It was approved. And so we started making them. And within a week, we was in full production. When I say full production, the production we were capable of doing. Now, we were making them on a flatbed cutter, it was an old machine, and we carried on going. So, yeah, we thought, this is a scary thing. We got to get something to help the NHS. We spoke to the Growth Hub. How can you help us? We need a faster machine. We need something that can get production up. We've got orders and we can't supply. And they said, well, talk to Pivot, and there's a project coming where 60 of the best projects that's available will get some support. And I said, yeah, that was through Pivot and Prosper. And it was via the GBL SEP. That's the Birmingham and Solihull Enterprise Board. So we did the application for support. It was quite rigorous, but it was very quick, fortunately, and it did work well. We managed to place an order for a new machine, and it arrived pretty quick because they were fishing for orders as well. We got the machine up and running, and we rapidly fulfilled orders that we had in place, and we continued to produce. Now, the big thing about this machine as well, obviously, when we hopefully get post-COVID, is that it's shown us a new way of manufacturing. We currently plat and cut components, and they have to be made off expensive tools. And very often those tools go to landfill immediately after use. So here we have it, this new machine, this high-speed cutter, which is 7 times faster than our old machine, which will now produce volume production without the effects of making tooling. So we were saving money, increasing the labour required to do it, because it's a slower process, but a cheaper process. So it's good all round. And we're now making small volume runs. We can't do the large volume runs, it's not economical. So small volume runs on this machine, and it's all working well. So I would say thank you very much to the GB SLP and also to the Pivot and Prosper team. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. We will come back to the Pivot and Prosper. Chris.
Good morning, folks. How are you doing? I'm going to take a risk.
I'm going to try sharing a video on my other screen. We'll see if this works. Has that come up for you, Charles? Lovely. Yeah. And I'm going to try playing the audio, but this has got subtitles on it as well, if anyone's struggling with audio, and then I'll explain where we went from here.
You help run a venue. It's your role to encourage repeat visits and improve visitor experience. But it can be a real headache just getting there. Roadworks, congestion, diversions, train delays, and overcrowding can all spoil the experience before people have even arrived. Your staff do their best to manage all the queries, but they don't have all the answers. Venue accessibility impacts time, money, and reputation. But what can you do to solve travel issues? There's one simple solution, easily integrated with all your visitor touchpoints. You Smart Thing guides people to venues and events the smart way. Our travel assistant software pulls in real-time information from across the transport network. Uniquely, it delivers tailored routes to venues and events, taking into account factors which impact the trip, like other events, accessible routes, venue access points, check-ins or kick-off times, and pre-show drinks. The travel assistant combines journey options with visitors' individual travel preferences, keeping you updated, making sure they arrive on time, and spread the word all the way back home. So rather than give your visitors a challenge, why not give them a door-to-door experience they'll love you for? Well done, you smart thing. Visit travel.usmartthing.com and guide people to your venue the smart way.
Super. Well, that proposition was the result of pretty much 5 years of research and development in identity management for travel management applications. And with the public sector being quite slow at procuring, we pivoted really our proposition, having done a lot of R&D in the public sector, to focus on the venue and event marketplace, as it was much more fluid. And in fact, we launched that proposition in anger in mid-2019 with contracts with Wembley Stadium, Edgbaston Cricket Ground, Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and such and so forth. So for us, of course, when COVID hit, having a proposition entirely geared around people traveling was not an ideal scenario. Before sort of just explaining how we pivoted back really to the public sector from that, I'll put this on the screen. This is a picture of War Memorial Park in Coventry. Over on the right-hand side, you can see the site of the Godiva Festival, which hosts around 80,000 people, or did annually. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a graphic of the War Memorial Park with what we call access points. And this is how we do what we do. We basically geolocate access points for people walking so that they can get to the facilities or the merchandise stand. We've got access points for 2 pop-up car parks with people driving in one way and out another, all entirely bespoke stuff that you would never get from Google. We then publish the travel assistant so that stakeholders can check we're routing people correctly. And then our clients publish the travel assistant on their website in front of customers. And this is it embedded in the Godiva Festival website. 2 days before the festival, in fact, back in 2019, and we had 1,700 people use the travel assistant to plan their journey to Godiva. And we can see from this data here that they traveled from far and wide. We've got people coming from up in Dumfries and down in Truro. So we have a bespoke travel assistant service allowing venues and events to curate journeys, capture visitor information, and use that for operational management. However, when COVID hit, we thought, my goodness, what are we going to do here? And what we've actually found is that we've really pivoted our proposition in 2 ways, back towards where we started really, which was the public sector. Firstly, we've launched a version of the travel assistant with, in fact, with Transport for Wales. And in order to get a train in Wales today, you have to have a journey plan created in our travel assistant, and that acts as a boarding pass. And what's happening in that instance is that we're actually rationing the amount of boarding passes that we issue, such that the team at Transport for Wales can proactively or reactively even ration the amount of people using their train services in the light of changing COVID restrictions. The second aspect of pivoting, and I'm pleased to say this was also co-funded by Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership with the Pivot and Prosper grant, was redefining our proposition for business improvement districts. And I'm proud to say that this has just been launched by Trish Willits and her team over in Coventry to basically allow all of their businesses to embed a travel assistant on their website, which guides people in and out of the city in a COVID conscious way. And there's a campaign going on now to engage businesses to do that, so that when restrictions are eventually released and we're all happily vaccinated, people will be able to travel in and out of the city safely and securely. Will we pivot back to venue and event management? Yes, to some degree, but with the experience that we've had of basically rationing capacity of people travelling in and out of cities and to venues and events. Thank you very much indeed. Look forward to the chat shortly. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It was great, Chris. Yeah, I look forward to talking about that too. Very good. Right, just me to introduce Binding Site, which I will also try and share my screen. There we go. See if that works. Can you see screen saying Binding Site, Chris?
We can.
Oh, good. Okay, because I can't. But anyway, so Binding Site, HQ headquarters is based here. We're founded in Birmingham. We span out of the University of Birmingham about in the mid-80s, so quite a long time ago, when spin-outs weren't actually the fashion. And we make blood tests for use in clinical laboratories, focusing on cancers, some cancers and disorders of the immune system. Year on year, we've continued to develop our business, and you should, yeah, there we go. So we're now growing consistently year on year. We now employ about 1,100 people, 750 of whom are in the UK. The vast majority in Birmingham, operating out of our two sites in Edgbaston, where I am now, and Kings Norton. All our products continue to be manufactured in the UK, so we do manufacture physical stuff here as well. But commercially, we now have a direct presence in about over 20 countries. Those are the dark blue countries that you can see on the map here. And we sell 90% of what we make goes abroad, more than 90%, and about half to the Americas and 30% to mainland Europe. So a little bit more about what we do. We develop and commercialize diagnostic tests. We specifically use them. They're specifically used in diagnosing and monitoring a very challenging cancer disease called multiple myeloma, which is bone marrow cancer, and other specific immune disorders, as well as vaccine response, and more on that later, obviously. We put our expertise into what we call clinically relevant science, and continue to be the global leaders in the areas in which we choose to participate, because although we're the largest diagnostics company in Britain, we are still relatively small, but to the likes of, you may have heard them of something called Siemens or Abbott or Roche and others, which is why we need to be selective in about the clinical areas in which we serve, and we need to be the expert in those. In order to do that, to keep ahead of competition, is we keep strong relationships not only with the laboratories, but also with the clinicians and with the research scientists around the world, not only here. But since March last year, we've learned and achieved a lot, I think, specifically from a COVID-19 perspective, and our continued strong links with the University of Birmingham, and observing actually that the initial quality of some of the tests that were on the market were, I would say, less than good at this stage. We collaboratively worked with the University of Birmingham, the University of Southampton, and the US National Institute of Health, collaboratively to make a very high quality antibody test and to commercialize that, which I think was called out only last week by the professor who's leading the charge of the UK Coronavirus Immunology Consortium as being world leading, and we still believe that's the case, which is obviously good news and a pat on the back for our scientists to do with me. The collaborative effort, as well as the parallel pathing, those various aspects of development, which I've also alluded to, meant that we reduced our normal path, development path. It normally takes us about 18 months to get a product to market. Brought that down to 4. There was considerable risk involved in that, manufacturing on risk, etc., and parallel pathing a lot, but we managed down to 4 months. And collaboration, I think, was also important because it minimized the politics. There was a very refreshing generosity from all parties, decision-making processes that maintained quality, but they were made quicker and often lower in the organization, because as you all appreciate, these products are very heavily regulated. And so the main learning point was from a product perspective, that was those two, but I also, and it's something I'd love to explore with the panel as well, we had various important learnings that we had throughout our business, including, for instance, the use of augmented reality in training engineers across the world, and in training customers to use our instrumentation. Likewise, working from home, how to equip and motivate our colleagues, and that's interesting for those people who, some are very used to working from home, many were not. Remotely connect and developing customer relationships, maintaining existing ones, developing new ones. I'd love to hear about that too, when you're not allowed to visit. And hiring and training remotely. Other important parts which normally, in order to engender the DNA of the company, you bring them in. So these are the things, are sort of some of the things I'd like to explore as we move through the session. I'll come off my screen now, he says confidently. How, I'm quite sure, hang on. No, screen sharing stopped. Good. Okay. So maybe what I'd like to explore first, Perninde, you brought up quite interesting. I mean, everybody sort of, in terms of the channels and the way you changed your approach. How difficult was it initially? Were you staring down at the end of a barrel, going, "I've got no business here," like Peter was talking, or was it somewhat more fluid?
I'd say that. Thank you, Charles. I'd say that it was more fluid for us in that definitely dealing with the complexities of clients who are getting used to doing remote working, but also in the field that we're working with, where we were creating products that need to be tested by patients as well. So it's not just a direct client. Actually, you've got people who are not used to technology at all, and you don't really even have an existing relationship with them. So having to try to do that type of work was a lot more difficult. Whereas, I said before, we would have organised a workshop, invited lots of people in, done a demo, asked them to play around with the prototype, and we would have had their feedback. But then what we realized was that actually the advantage that came out of having to do a lot more tools, which obviously does, some cases does come with a cost, because obviously you've got to have subscriptions to multiple things, but a lot of them are also free as well. So that benefit of allowing people will actually, if they're used to just chatting on FaceTime, it doesn't have to be because it's a business meeting, it has to be on Zoom or Teams or anything like that. And so that flexibility really helped us. But because there were then a lot more one-on-one sessions as opposed to a group workshop, I'd say the depth of feedback we received actually was greater. And that's where, like if we talk about why our longer term learnings from, a route that we've been forced down, is definitely that actually that process that we had, which was always, we do a workshop, everybody turns up, we take the feedback, and then everybody goes home and it's all done within an hour, isn't necessarily giving us the best results. And we would never have questioned that if we hadn't been forced to go down that route because of the restrictions.
Good. Peter, I might ask, I mean, clearly you said that you had an order book of 0 basically in March, and you were looking for new markets and got rung up by, contacted by, someone from a long time before. Did you also actively go out and seek new business, and are you doing that now? Oh, he's on. I think you need to put yourself, you're on mute, Peter.
Okay, I'm off it. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, well, there were several problems arose. We were competing with the whole world for product material, raw material. So the whole world's searching for the face shield material, which was the one we were making. I mean, so we had to try and make something with the material we had or was available. So we started off making something like this, if I can just show you, a little simple face shield. And then as certain materials came along, we made a different type of face shield. So, and everyone's a different way and a different thing. And then we ended up, ultimately, as things calmed slightly with the supply, we got the NHS type face shield, which is foam, printed, Preston. But every single item on there is in screaming demand all over the world, or was. It's calming down now. So yeah, we have to keep trying new ideas. The print industry, or certainly the industry we do, is very quick fire. So our turnaround time is very quick for anything we do. Every cardboard construction that we make is fully engineered, it's prototyped, and it's everyone is different. So our ability to do a design is very quick fire. So really, Pivot and Prosper's what we do virtually every day of the week, really. What was unique about it was, because that's the way we survive, and we are in a very competitive market. The print world is quite a smart bunch of people within their constraints of what they do. But what happened, what was unique about it was the NHS was screaming, and we were there to try and support. And but that was a big win for us. It didn't create any great wealth for us. It just kept us going. It made us enthusiastic in a time of crisis. And we were fully involved in it, but it didn't employ a lot of people to do it. So at that particular time, we're now getting back into the realm of things, and we're busy all the time now. So we're getting back into it. But I tried to, we looked at getting, the problem we had basically was telling the world that we now do something new and different. So we Google Ads. So we used Google, and we started off initially at £16 a day with Google charges. And out of that, we had a massive return from customers. People, it almost felt like the phone did not stop ringing from qualified customers. And I'm talking customers who wanted 100 at the time, 100 shields at the time. But that change transformed dramatically as the world latched on, and Google, or if you like, Amazon and Google latched on. And we went, the cost to advertise through Google went up 100 times in the space of 2 months. So it was a completely non-entity to try and advertise through Google. The Google click ad process was just impossible. And that was a real killer for us. We had a product we could sell, but Google, the route from China was so much easier than coming through the UK. The cost of advertising was massive. It just didn't make it sensible. So we retained all the customers we got initially, and we carried on working with them. And it did work quite well. It was quite good, really. So
because that is about balancing.
The
volume.
Sorry, what was that again, Charles?
Balancing demand and supply. Oh, I think we've lost volume and the speech on Pete.
Mute.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, go on. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so demand and supply was a problem, and that's why we needed a new and faster machine. And that's where we did get support, and it happened very quickly, remarkably quickly. I mean, processes for buying a new machine are normally 6 to 8 months process, start to finish. This happened in 6 weeks.
Very good. Very good.
So it's great.
Thank you. Chris, if I could ask you a question. The customer base that you had before, that you'd originally designed for, and then you moved away from them in 2019. And then was that renewing the existing type that you had back in 2018-19, or were they completely new? And how did you source them? How did you find?
Yeah, it was a bit of a mix. So we had spent pretty much between 2014 and 2018 providing R&D innovation all around transport and network management, and specifically personalized journey planning to the public sector. And the majority of that work was either with local authorities or directly with train operating companies, in our case. So kind of having moved away from that to focus on venues and events, but still with travel and transport at the heart of what we do, it wasn't too difficult to go back and sort of knock on doors that were still ajar. And what we very, very quickly realized...
Was that a physical knock?
In odd cases, it was a physical knock, because we actually did have to go and do some site surveys of particular stations to sort of gauge proximity requirements in terms of crowding and people at platforms and such. But no, the majority are a digital knock on the door. And we very quickly realized that the demand for our core platform in terms of managing transport network capacity is actually far greater post-COVID than pre-COVID, or during COVID than pre-COVID. So that led us to then a whole set of new relationships, having kind of realised that, and working primarily with Transport for West Midlands. We were very quickly introduced to numerous other authorities, and the biggest contract that we won as a result of that was with Transport for Wales, who we didn't have any previous contact with, and weren't a previous customer, and had an immediate requirement, heard of us because of the work that we were doing with Transport for West Midlands. And I'm pleased to say we're now happily delivering our service to them. What's emerged from all this is actually a new kind of business model for us, and Transport for Wales and Transport for West Midlands and others are now proactively introducing us to venues and events in and around the region, and saying, hi guys, this is the way to safely and securely guide audiences back to your location when restrictions are lifted. So it's become, the public sector has become our sales channel, our wholesale channel, which is amazing, really.
It's marvellous when a customer sells to the customer for you.
Yeah, yeah. So we're just trying to make sure we stay.
Very good. Very good. At this point, I'd just like to ask anybody who's listening in, please type in any of your questions in the Q&A. I think Pam's trying to pull them together because I can't see them on my screen, and she'll send them through to ask.
Charles, I have one question if you want me to ask it now.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, but just to say to people, there's a little bit of an issue with the Q&A in the chat, so feel free to put questions on the chat or the Q&A. So there was one question from Paddy Murphy about the region's response to the PPE debacle. The region's response was excellent with the Midlands PPE collective, but how do we sustain it when NHSE mandates central procurement?
Yeah. Well, so from a PPE perspective,
be extended to other NHS requirements.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask. I mean, Peter obviously has found a new customer in the NHS. I'm assuming with the shields. I don't know about the how the procurement process went for him, but it'd be quite interesting to hear. if you can put yourself off mute again, Peter.
Okay, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, we had a very interesting phone calls from the government saying, you make face shields? We go, yes. How many can you make? Well, we can make 7,000 a day. Oh, that's good. That's excellent. And do you make them in the UK? Yes. You actually make them yourself? Yes, we make them. Oh, this is brilliant. We'll be back shortly. We're getting people to talk to you about the spec. So they come back and talk to us and go after about a week and say things like, okay, how many can you produce? Well, 7,000 a day is possible. If you give us a plan, we can probably double that by working night shift and doing all sorts of plans. You know, everything's possible. No, we need somebody who's got a stock now. So, well, I said, how many do you need? He said, we can't tell you how many we need because you'll just say you can do it. And I said, oh, that's ridiculous. I said, I'm in the world of business. Tell me how many you want and I'll tell you what I can do to support you. And that's the kind of nonsense that went on. So all our work with the NHS, eventually, when they got a supply, disappeared. We were supplying people like train companies, bus companies, and they were our bigger users towards it. Going forward, they're still our biggest customers. So bus drivers are wearing our shields and so on. But as regards to the NHS, they prefer to buy from China, from what I can see.
Yeah. Well, clearly you're not new. I know that certainly from us, I mean, we in our diagnostic tests side of things, although we supply the NHS, you know, around the country with products for the cancers and for the and for immune system issues, and the fact this was co-developed, still the public health thing have they found themselves inundated with product, and they didn't have a screening process. So all they did, they said, well, first come, we'll have a look at those, as opposed to and have an in-depth look. And it was pretty poor, I have to say. And I say it on here, but I mean, we know, I've said it to the government a couple of weeks ago, in terms of our experience and the lessons that need to be learned out of that is significant, especially just in terms of having capacity in this country, so that in, you know, heaven forbid another crisis, but whenever there is a need to manufacture things on within the borders, it's it's there and ready, and that there's a process that can go through that actually actively and quickly, swiftly provides that. Chris, I don't suppose you've had venue. Have you had any? You haven't had any of the hospitals asking you to do venue planning and visit planning for them, have you?
We actually created travel assistance for the Nightingale hospitals and for key workers, and the key worker solution prioritised car parks that were near to regular hospitals, but not the actual hospital car parks, which were over congested. If you remember the beginning of the pandemic, so it was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, but we did get several thousand people using that for the 2 months, I think, May and June, just before the first lockdown was released. I've got my dates wrong there. So yeah, it's been an interesting and crazy world. But actually, just going back to Peter and procurement, we did buy screens. So after the first lockdown was restricted, we've got a team of 10 people in on Temple Row in Birmingham, and we bought dividers for the desks, the transparent perspex dividers, which I never imagined doing. But it does strike me that the market for PPE is not just restricted to the NHS. It's very much everybody from the co-op, as I went into this morning, through to us in our offices in town, and through to everyone else who's got a physical environment. I think there's a huge market, an ongoing market for PPE. So I hope that works well for Peter and
No, I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. Peninda, I don't know about number of employees you have and how they operate. Is it mostly remote now?
So now it is mostly remote, although we have a team of 10 that used to set up in Coventry, and now we're kind of pretty much everybody's pretty much working from home. But just going back to the NHS point, we do a lot of work with the NHS and across multiple trusts, and I think that issue of centralized purchasing versus local purchasing it's one that's been going on for a very long time and has been brought to the forefront by the COVID-19 issues, and people see the NHS as one organisation, but then obviously when you work with it at any kind of depth, you realise that actually the NHS is not one organisation; it's a multiple of organisations. You've got various entities that sit within it, whether it's trusts and ICTs or care groups, and that actually it's a really large monster to navigate. And once you build relationships, yes, it is possible. You can get work done quite quickly. But on the whole, I'd say our experience of when we try and launch a new product beyond, say, a trust that we're working in, it's really difficult because actually the NHS is not geared for mass rollouts of stuff in that way. We see it as one big thing, but it really isn't. And yeah, so I think that Paddy, you asked the question. Yeah, I definitely think that there's still room for significant improvement in the way that the NHS procures. But within the current structures, I'm not sure that would ever really change.
Yeah, so clearly lessons to be learned there, I think, absolutely. Have you, Linda, stay on, have you found that you're gathering new customers or trying to find new customers, has that changed? Has your approach changed, and how successful do you think it's been?
But I think like everybody, it's been to some extent, definitely during the first lockdown, and even to this lockdown, we've taken the foot off the gas a little bit because people have got worries and concerns in their everyday life, which transcend them wanting to receive a new business call or and so we've kind of taken a much more focused approach about keeping in contact with our existing clients, making sure that everybody's okay, business is functioning, and where we're reaching out to new prospects, obviously there is no physical meetings, a lot of it is through email, etc. But we've really been focusing only on where we think we can make their lives easier in the current circumstances. So rather than just a generic, we're selling our services, we've really tried to pinpoint places where we said, well, actually, do you know what, we think we can build you a bespoke piece of software which might help you with this particular issue that we think you might be having. And it means that we probably speak to less people than we did before, but the conversations probably are a little bit more nuanced, and actually, it does drive change. But the truth is, a lot of what happens at the moment is still very much, yes, we're interested in this, but it's going to be in 2, 3, 4, 5 months time, and we absolutely understand that. So if you like, from our point of view, we've done very much a softer approach to things, and we've worked really around actually, if what we're selling is not your thing right now, we're not really going to waste your time with it, and try to really be helpful in that way, if nothing else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, leaving even a prospect with a good feeling that they can come back to is important, I think, any business. Chris, aside from the local... Sorry.
Charles, sorry, just to interject. We've got about 5 minutes to go, and we have another question from Susanna.
Very good.
Which Chris has already partly answered in the chat. So do you think that there'll be a move towards health-based and health and safety-based risk management of products and services across all sectors as a result of the big shock of COVID-19 and the new thinking resulting from it?
Okay, Chris, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I sort of partly answered it, and I put sadly in a sense. Yes, I do, and sadly in a sense because I grew up in the 70s riding a BMX around the local estate with no helmet on. God forbid, that level of freedom really does feel like something from generations ago. So sadly, in a sense, I do think more and more services are going to be geared around risk management and safety as a result of the shock of COVID. The enabler, I think, here is going to be how people view sharing personal data and personal information, because it's through sharing personal data and personal information that I think safety and security can be brought about. And GDPR was another kind of big scare story in a way. And, you know, I was sick of turning the radio on and hearing about somebody else who died because their doctor thought that they couldn't share the information about the patient's ailment with another party for fear of being hauled through the coals because of GDPR. We need to think about personal data as an asset, not as something that we've got to protect against. And I think there needs to be a huge re-education, especially in the health service. And I think it comes in terms of legislation as well, that we need to enable legislatively and culturally ourselves to share data so that we don't have accidents that could be prevented because we were too scared to do so.
Yeah, part of being in a society, I think, and one where you are a collective. Absolutely. Peter, any views on how you changed your workplace as well as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, just one moment. I'm coming up. Okay, so yeah, in fact, this is my first day in work for probably 2 weeks now. So we are most of the staff are either furloughed or out, you know, because the workload has dropped and by about 40%. But yeah, what we've done is we're resisting strongly taking in contract workers because there's too much mix of people. So we're operating as a bubble as a workforce, and obviously we make dividers. So we've got plenty of dividers in the building, keeping people separate. I think the future will hold. Once COVID's over, I believe things will be a lot safer. Will be a lot better. I think there will people jump on the bandwagon about more and more security required in your business, charging you ridiculous fees to come and look at what your business is doing. But I feel things will settle quite quickly. In fact, I'm amazed at the way people are handling the current death rate. It's amazing, surprising, very surprising. I don't see. I supply a certain bus company with dozens and dozens of face shields. I never see a driver with one on. It's remarkable, really. And they're still ordering them every day, you know. So it's strange. Yeah. So there is a level of complacency, I think, with people. I think the workspace, certainly from the office point of view, can be controlled quite well. But from works, it's a bit more difficult. Interaction of people, certainly the kind of business we're in, where we're handling every job's a different job. It's not a production line type process. It's difficult. But so far, we've been completely covered by taking common sense care.
Belinda, how are your thoughts on the future?
Can you hear me now, okay, sir?
Yep.
Yes, so just going back to Suzanne's question then of do we think that we move towards health-based and health safety-based risk management? I think that risk management has always been in the workplace, and you know, I think that there is a reality that for a lot of firms up until now, risk management has actually been very much a tick box exercise. It's one of those things that gets done once a year. There's a survey done, we do it, we tick the boxes, we say we've done it, and it's great. But what I think this pandemic has done is probably made risk assessment and risk management a much more core attribute of management's responsibility. So rather than seeing it as one of those things that's done as a tick box and there's no specific responsibility, I think the future is that we will see risk management becoming something that is much more at the fore of management's thoughts. And whether that means that PPE exists in quite the same way that it does, I'm not quite sure. But I definitely think that the way that we continue to assess stuff will be more continuous rather than this concept of we do it once a year.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we've obviously we have PPE in our labs and everything else and had it already, but clearly we have 750 people. In March, we rapidly went down to 400 because that's the physical quantity of human beings we can accommodate suitably socially distanced, and there's an awful lot. And the risk assessments, absolutely. I mean, we've been updating ours probably on a, if not a fortnightly basis, so if not a weekly basis, a fortnightly basis over the last 10 months, as we continue to learn more about what's going on as well. And we have, continual conversation with the health and safety executive, with Public Health England, etc. So as with anything, you put a restriction in, it's very easy to implement one. It's very difficult to bring it back down, I think, is the other side. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that the half hour now has rushed past. I do want to thank all the panelists, and certainly for your contributions. I would say, clearly there's been various innovations that have been learned, not only about how to get new customers, but also maintaining the sort of new processes of development, the speed, the reaction, and the appetite for, I suppose, risk. Some of it's driven just by the opportunities that you think are there, and others are just because of necessity. But I think I would have loved to ask you my last question, which I don't think we got time for, but what would you tell yourself now that you didn't know in March 2020? That's something maybe for another day. But I would think that there have been we've all learned an awful lot about this in these last 10 months, and I hope that we will continue to implement a lot of those learnings over the next decade or so, as we continue to refine and the way in which we respond to external influences, let's say. So thank you all very much. I look forward to meeting you physically at some point, and until then, I think we're on to the next.